In this episode of Vox Machina, the party take on a Dueregar War Camp, and Pike joins the party for the first time on stream.
Hi
everyone, my name is Luna, and I've been really enjoying going back and revisiting Campaign 1, so let's get into it. Laura is missing from the first part of the episode due to some other commitments, but she rocks up about halfway through. We pick up with the party after their meeting with Chloroda, the mind flayer cast out that Keyleth and Vex discovered last week hidden in a cave behind a waterfall. A good reminder to check behind every single waterfall in every single game you play. An uneasy alliance had been brokered with him, so they head back to the goblin little encampment to take a long rest and plan their attack on this war camp. On the way, Vax notices a floating light moving throughout the goblin encampment, so he and Scanlan go and investigate. They find a mysterious armored gnome creeping around.
Hey guys! It's me, Pike!
Jeez, where have you been?
Oh man, I've had quite a time. I've missed you guys terribly, and a lot has happened, and I'm sure for you guys as well.
Hooray! It's so wonderful having Ashley here. I'm so used to having her in every episode of Campaign 3 that it's really odd to remember that she was actually absent for most of Campaign 1 and quite a big chunk of Campaign 2. I can't remember if I already talked about this in a prior video, so apologies if so, but she was away a lot because she was filming a TV show called Blind Spot, which was taking place in another part of the country. That's why she is sort of in and out and sometimes Skyping in. Pike is looking at the symbol of Bahamut, the symbol of the Platinum Dragon that the party were investigating a little bit last week. And for her first roll of the game, a religion roll, she rolls a nat 20. That's what we like to see. With this nat 20, she sees a vision of Lady Kima carving this symbol as part of a protection ritual. Lady Kima is, of course, the paladin of Bahamut that they are looking for. Lady Kima was sent a vision by her god that there was some darkness lurking underneath Kraghammer, which sort of set off this whole series of events in motion. Pike, Vax, and Scanlan meet up with the rest of the party, and Vax asks Chlorota basically for his backstory, what happened to him and what happened to his hive. He explains that he was cast out of his home city Yugvoril for being an arcane user. He was severed from the hive mind for this. Basically, the mind flayers of his hive value and cultivate psionic powers, mind powers. They don't like arcane powers, essentially. He has been wandering these caves for 7 years, and in his travels, he discovered a Dueregar fortress. He spent a lot of time sort of hiding in the outskirts of that fortress, taking advantage of stragglers and wanderers and feeding on them. He witnessed a great battle there and saw that it had been taken over by a creature called Kavan. He hadn't actually seen the creature, so he doesn't know what Kavan is, but he knows that it managed to bend all of the Dueregar and the surrounding creatures to its will. About 4 months ago, the Dueregar captured a mind flayer who belonged to Chlorota's hive city, and seemingly it learned from this mind flayer the whereabouts of it, so the Duergars marched on the city.
And the colony allowed the Ashskins to waltz directly into the temple, unharmed, unchallenged, where our elder brain resides. It wasn't until after I discovered whomever this Kavan is, they themselves infiltrated the temple and somehow took the elder brain under their own control. I watched as my people had their will robbed of them. And they took the will of all the others that lived and breathed in these tunnels. Now, a terrible army is forged of both factions. And they walk under the banner of this Kavan.
Also, hello Dale Kingsmill, I saw you there in the comments. So Kavan now has an army of both Dueregar and Mind Flayers, which explains why we saw those two parties working together in the previous episode. Chloroda, using scraps of metal and things that he could find, has managed to avoid the influence of Kavan by using the metal helmet that he made, the Magneto helmet, essentially. Vax asks if they do help Chloroda free the hive mind and free his people from this effect that Kavan has on them, will they have designs on Kraghammer? Do they have any interest in, spreading their mind flayer business further out? And Chloroda says no, they don't have any interest in the surface. They only want to look at expanding their knowledge in their city under the surface. The party are still distrusting of Chloroda, which I think is a solid instinct. Scanlan inquires if they could somehow use the creature who is lurking in the underground lake, the creature that they saw pulling Dueregar and goblins underneath the water. But Clarita says nope, because it is an aboleth. Aboleths are creatures that can also manipulate other creatures' mind. They have this really nasty power called Enslave, where if the target fails their wisdom saving throw, they are charmed by the aboleth until the aboleth dies or they are on another plane of existence. They can make their save if they take damage or at the end of every day, but still, I mean, that's nasty. They can also psychically drain a target, doing both damage to the target and healing themselves at the same time. But aboleths are kind of cool. They have perfect memories, and they share their memories and their knowledge generation to generation to generation. So they have a memory that spans back as long as they have existed. So they're a treasure trove of weird knowledge and lore. It's like a really fun way to give your party like a lore drop of some information a game, but that's only counting on the aboleth not eating them first. As they are trying to formulate a plan about taking on the Dueregar army and the Dueregar War Camp, as well as the Mind Flayer city, Pike shares that she had a vision.
In this vision that I had, I was pulled down toward the mines, into the tunnels below where the dwarves were working.
Through the lake?
Well, past the goblinoid creatures and past a great underground lake. Past a jagged onyx-colored fortress framed in molten rock. Past a field of broken glass and bone.
I think these visions are a really great way of tying Pike into the current questline, because there's nothing worse than, when you have to sit out some D&D games and then your character comes in and you feel like you have no idea what's going on and you don't really feel like you have anything to contribute because you don't have any knowledge of those prior games. So giving a absent player something to bring to the table when they return, I think is a really great strategy and a really good tip for all DMs out there. They also just make perfect sense for Pike, given that she is a cleric of the Everlight, or Sarenrae as they called her at that time, before they didn't worry too much about copyrighted names. Like any good infiltration episode, Vox Machina spend a huge amount of time trying to decide what to do to come up with a plan, and then like any good D&D party, they throw any planning to the wayside and just decide to go for it. I honestly really appreciate that, because I think any DM knows that anytime there's an infiltration or like a heist episode of some kinds, the planning can sort of spiral out of control sometimes. It's good to put a time limit on it, or to just let the party just go in guns blazing without stressing too much about the finer details. They decide to fly up and over the Dueregar War Camp, so Keyleth turns into an eagle and she carries the two gnomes, and the rest of the group are on the flying carpet, except for Grog, who is flying thanks to a fly spell from Tiberius. As they're flying over the city, they see siege engines being built, weapons, giant weapons. It's clear that the Dueregar and, Kavan is planning an assault on Craghammer above. They come to the center of this encampment and land on the roof of a large building, which is the barracks. Vax and Scanlan, who are invisible, scale down the wall and manage to creep inside. And it's at this point that Laura arrives, so that's nice. Hi, Laura. Vax and Scanlan quickly manage to dispatch a couple of guards silently without alerting anybody, and they head into a central chamber here in the barracks. Seated at a large war table upon a platform is the Mind Flayer that we saw earlier, the Dueregar General, as well as two other Dueregar. And it's at this point that Vax and Scanlan start to panic, because there is a guard that is sort of making a patrol that they can hear about to come around the corner, and while both of them are invisible, the problem is that they're standing over a dead guard, so So Vax, at some point, who had picked up a bucket of refuse, gives that to Scanlan and sneaks around behind the Mind Flayer. And then Scanlan takes that bucket and throws it in the Mind Flayer's face.
You fling it as the invisibility spell wears off of you as part of the attack. You fling the bucket. A spray of thick, gooey goblin fecal matter goes streaking through the air as the illithid turns with its eyes wide to see you suddenly appear, and then suddenly see this entire batch of thick goblin shit just across its face. Suddenly you see its tentacles writhing as it goes.
Coming from behind, Vax stabs the Mind Flayer for 62 damage in a single round. The reason he could do so much damage is because he is an assassin rogue, that is the assassin subclass, and they have this feature where if they attack a target who has not yet gone in the initiative or not, they get advantage on their attack, and any attack that lands is considered a critical. So he gets advantage on the attack, well, because of his assassin ability, but also because he was invisible. He gets a critical hit automatically, and he gets sneak attack. So that is a lot of dice to roll. Rogues, man. Oh, plus he had poison damage as well from his poison dagger, so it all adds up. And with that, the party roll initiative. On top of the roof, the rest of Vox Machina are scrambling and trying to prepare. Keyleth casts Daylight on a pot that Grog is wearing on his head, and Pike casts it on her shield. The idea behind this is that they're hoping that this Daylight spell, or these Daylight spells, will be able to blind the Mind Flayer, so the Mind Flayer can't look into their eyes and control them. Liam, as if Vax wasn't already being a wildly OP rogue, manages to roll a nat 20 on initiative, so Vax is up again first and attacks the Mind Flayer again, before it even has had a chance to do any of its creepy powers.
So the first strike, you swing across with the flame tongue dagger. As it backs up, you put another gash across the front of its neck and chest area. It reels back and it's looking at you with angry fury. You feel this coming shake, this horrible force of severe retribution coming to your mind. And as you're bracing for it, you take your other blade, you see its mouth opens up with frustration and anger as its tentacles kind of curl back, ready to just go in for the grab. And you place the blade squarely into that maw. You feel the scraping of its teeth across your knuckles, but it doesn't matter because whatever anger and light was once in its face goes dark and dark. As immediately it crumples to the ground, lifeless. You pull the blade from the maw.
I think every DM has felt the pain of that moment when your party obliterates a cool monster that you had planned and you didn't get to show off any of the cool abilities and the cool setups you'd done. But sometimes you gotta hand it to the party. When they get the drop, they get the drop. The Dueregar general rushes Vax, and as he does so, he kind of grows in size and activates a flaming warhammer. Up on the roof, Grog smashes through the roof, sending he and Pike careening down and leaving an opening that everybody else can come through to join in the fray. More Dueregar rush in from other parts of the barracks, and they are all trading blows and slinging spells. Scanlan makes a clever play on the general.
Okay, I'm gonna cast Dominate Person on the general.
What does that do?
Oh, shit.
No.
He's a power top.
With advantage, you rolled a 1 and a 2 on the saving throw. That's ridiculous.
And
Okay.
I'm going to dominate him and inform him. I can give him a command, right? Yes.
You can make him do whatever.
I'm going to tell him to stand down and tell all of his allies to stand down.
All right. He turns around, gives you a look, a strange look.
Men, all of you, drop your weapons. Now, we are surrendering to our new infiltrators.
He throws his warhammer to the ground.
Keyleth, using this moment, casts Grasping Vines and fixes him in place. And then they all hear a shudder from underground. This is the third or fourth time in the last couple of episodes that they've heard this shudder. So we've had this foreshadowing coming for a while. They all roll kind of bad on their stealth checks. So a creature, hearing them moving around, wanting to come and check it out, bursts through the ground.
All right, you managed to just pull out of the way.
Yes.
As a large,
What the
a large armored four-legged creature comes bursting out of the ground around you.
This creature is a boulette, which is a very strange creature, and it has some abilities focused around jumping and doing a lot of bludgeoning damage. It turns out that chat actually picked this monster because at this time, Critical Role was still doing a lot more audience interaction with the Twitch chat as they were building the stream. They still had the capacity to do that, and then I think fairly quickly it got to a point where it was just not manageable to do that as much anymore because the chat audience was so big. There are some really cool moments in this fight, like Vex getting a natural 20 and using her Hail of Thorns ability.
15. All right, so what happens here is you pull an arrow out. As you whisper a couple of words under your breath, you see all these thorny spikes begin to shoot out the shaft of the arrow. You release it, and as it strikes in the front of its face, the arrow actually splinters, sending a bunch of these thorns all over its torso, piercing an inch or two into its armor with each blast of these thorns. It kind of rears back and tries to shake itself off. As it does, you get a little bit of a look as Grog backs away from it, shaking to see the wound he left. You take your secondary arrow, aim for the red soft spot, boom, slips right past the armored plating, doing the extra damage on the interior of its physical self. Awesome. That's your turn, I believe.
And Percy stacking all of his abilities and firing an explosive bullet directly into the boulette's mouth.
Okay, I spent some grit on this and
Okay.
did some interesting
How
modifiers.
much grit did you spend?
2 points of grit.
Okay, and this is the,
This is the dead shot.
okay.
And I also took a negative. I took a -5 to hit for a +10 damage to this shot,
Okay.
And I'm using my fire modifier.
Okay.
Not being an asshole.
Okay.
So
That's amazing.
He's Samus blasting right now.
Yeah.
that's
Come on, come down. Ooh.
16, that's 20, 35 points of fire damage inside of its mouth.
So, your hand inside, you pull back and fire, knowing which barrel's next. You hear this dull sound, and its eyes kind of pulse for a second with intense fury and pain. Smoke just billows out the sides of its mouth and its nostrils, and it begins to kind of shake its head, lifting you about a foot off the ground painfully, but you think it's worth the deal. Well done.
And Grog gets the how do you want to do this? And we're once again treated to a disgustingly gory kill description.
I would like to swing through and catch the corner of its mouth, open its mouth wide, and then I'd like to reach in and with my teeth pull its fucking tongue out of its head and start thrashing it side to side.
And that's why you're on the team.
And as it falls, the tongue that's hanging in my mouth, I look to one of the dwarves that's left and I go, who's next?
Grog, that genuinely made me feel nauseous. Let me know, what was your favorite part of this combat? Do you enjoy the gory descriptions, or are you squeamish like me? Please tell me that there are other people out there who find Grog's kills a bit much. Something that really stuck out to me, particularly in this fight, I think it was just because there were, it was mostly combat, was just how much it seems like in these earlier episodes, Matt is handling the combat descriptions. It feels very much like it leans on his side in terms of describing things in these episodes, especially like in the how do you want to do this, like the characters or the players, will describe the kill, and then Matt will then describe it again, basically, and then adding more detail. I feel like as time moves on, and we're, and now we're seeing like 7 years later, there seems to be a little bit more of an even balance of those descriptions during combat, or at least it feels that way to me. And it could just be a matter of like both Matt like deciding or learning to like step back a little and let the players have more of that descriptive narrative control, or the player is also getting more confident in taking the reins in that descriptive control. So yeah, that's just something interesting I found compared between episodes then and episodes now. So again, it's a relatively short episode this week, only about 2.5 hours, but that is because they do about a 2-hour Q&A afterwards with the Twitch chat. It provides some really good insight into the early game and how this whole sort of thing came to be. Liam talks a bit about the origin story of their group, which is that he and Matt were working together on a voice acting project, and Matt kept inviting him to some games, but because he had kids and he found it hard to find the commitment, and so then he asked Matt for his birthday if he would run a one-shot, and then they had such a great time that they then kept it going into the campaign. The events of that one-shot are actually immortalized in one of the Vox Machina comics, where we see the party arriving at the town of Stilben and their adventures there. Liam also talks a little bit about what they hope the show will do, or why they're doing it.
Somebody asked something
I'm not.
like, what do we hope is the result of this show? I can't remember the wording, but I mean, obviously we're doing this because we love each other and we're having fun together, but I also hope, that D&D has been its entire history has been like, this is this weird thing that guys do with dice in a room. Anyone can do this. I love video games, I work in video games, but D&D has changed my life. It is social. It is person to person. It is real because it's people in a room doing shit together, and that's kind of lacking a little bit in our world. And I would say find some friends. I mean, I love that there are sort of online tools to play with people across the country, but if you can find 3 or 4 people in your town to do this, I'd say do it. Do it because it's just really real. And
do it.
Yeah, there's something really amazing about the fact that we're all essentially kind of building and communally developing a story together. And that's something that not a whole lot of things can grant you, and that we don't really get in today's society much. We're all kind of creating this as a thing, and I think it's good that we're like, hey, this is socially acceptable. Like, D&D's cool. Everyone should play D&D.
I think we can absolutely say that Critical Role did increase awareness about D&D. It did encourage people to get into it more and encourage them to play with their characters, role play with them. I think it did open up a lot of doors for people to get into the hobby. It was also really interesting to hear them talking about how they didn't know how long it was going to run for. They didn't know if they would, do another campaign once they finished this one. And of course, here we are 7 years later in the 3rd campaign, Wild. Something else I really enjoyed is Marisha talking about some of the decisions she made in terms of Keyleth's personality.
And I remember when I joined this game, I didn't really know any of you guys really all that well, and I was kind of like new to this world. So I ended up going with a kind of druid, and I kind of deliberately made her introvert in a weird way to kind of reflect my new coming to the group. And I was like, oh, it'll be like, I can be quiet. And so Keyleth has a really low charisma, but I kind of spin it in like she's naive and doesn't really know, and that's why she says things like, but Clarence, you're just special because she's naive and, you know, kind of quiet. And so she was just different than anything I've played before. But I really love being a druid. Druids are great.
Those that were around in those early Campaign 1 days will know that Marisha copped like a lot of flack and a lot of hate for her character of Keyleth. I think a lot of that is probably rooted in sexism. I know that Laura also copped some hate as well for her depiction of Vex. And I think this is just such a great reminder of how the character traits that seem to rub people the wrong way about Keyleth were character traits that Marisha specifically put into the character, which lent to the story. And you can see that when she does other characters, the other campaigns, that those characters are very different. So yeah, I really enjoyed this like sort of early little insight. Matt also mentions in this Q&A that he would love to play a game with Stephen Colbert one day, which is so cool that that was a dream of his that came true for the Red Nose Day one-shot. We also learned that the party's original name was The Shits.
The Shits. How do we become the Shits?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So the party had run into a de-bearded, actually a shaven dwarf named Grimthorn, who wanted to represent them for what is occasionally a roving brawling guild, essentially. These like underground fighting rings that happen around the world at different points throughout the year. They may come up again, we'll see. But they had to think of a team name. And Scanlan recommended that super high intensity team, which stuck for a while. And so the group name, against the better judgment of, I think, a lot of the group, became the Shits.
Yep.
So their name for a while was the Shits. They were announced as the Shits in the ring when they won the tournament. That was when the pony was cut in half.
That's right.
To intimidate the opposing team and gave
Scanlan's
them
idea also.
Tiberius and Keyleth were not happy.
Shit stuck for a while until eventually they got rid of the Shits, as all of a sudden they were about to go to the Winter Festival parade in their honor for saving the entire city of Iman, and the Sovereign Uriel said, what should we announce you as? And it was decided not to announce you guys in front of the city at your parade as the Shits.
I was super into it.
And instead,
still love the Shits.
Instead, the name became Vox Machina.
Smart idea to change the name, I think. For branding, it was smart. All right, so if you don't want to know what happens in future episodes of Campaign 1, stop watching now. Goodbye. But otherwise, spoilers ahead. We are getting more and more hints now dropped about Kavan, and of course we're going to meet Kavan eventually. I think it's about episode 10 where we learn his true nature, which is that he is a beholder. And not just a beholder, he is like a mutated beholder that has a horn of Orcus in his head, like embedded into his head. This is a sort of like powerful, evil magic item that enhances, and also it's kind of like, I think it's quite mysterious what sort of powers it grants, but essentially it's like no good. And this power and this influence is how he has managed to take over the Dueregar and the Mind Flayers. Actually, we'll talk about it more when we get there, but I really love this setup of like, oh, the hive mind is usually something that is like going out and controlling things, etc. But then something coming in and controlling that hive mind as well. I just enjoy that little like flip on it. It was also actually really cool that in the Q&A, Marisha said she really wanted to fight a beholder one day because it was her favorite D&D monster, and well, be careful what you wish for. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons and my YouTube members. It is my goal this year to make this my full-time job, and I cannot do that without my patrons' support. So thank you, with a special thank you to Yasha, Admiral, Chad, Mark, Tony, Rob, BRB, and Gemini. If you would like to help me reach my goal of making this my full-time thing, you can sign up for as little as $2 or $5 a month at Patreon. If you can't support financially but you still want to help out, the best thing to do is to like, comment, subscribe. I know it's the cliche, but it really helps. And to also share this video with some friends outside of YouTube, like maybe on your favorite subreddit or your favorite Facebook group. Share it with other critters. But thank you. I'm hoping we're gonna get there. 2023, it's happening. All right, until next time, bye.
All right, so that's preparation there.
Oh, I'm gonna sing a little ditty to inspire Vax. I didn't see the Vax, cause he's so goddamn stealthy. La da 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 da. Okay, good.
Was that a high soft side?
Yes, yeah.